The Best Picture Oscar is the most prestigious award on the planet, and oftentimes it honors nothing but the best of the best. And then oftentimes it doesn't.
Green Book.
With the 98th edition of the Academy Awards speedily approaching, I decided to explore some of the worst rated Best Picture winners of all time. We're going to be starting off with some of the more, well-known titles and moving through to the real lowest of the low. So make sure to stay tuned until the end of the video, and let's get into it. So I started off with Crash, maybe not the lowest rated of the bunch, but definitely the most infamous bad Best Picture winner. This won in 2006 in what was granted a kinda slow year.
Crash.
Beating out Munich, Good Night and Good Luck, Capote, and most notably, Brokeback Mountain. Ooh, freaking drama alert over here. Now, I have seen, well, none of these other films, so I can't attest to how it stacks up, but I have now seen Crash, so I can attest to if it's actually that bad. Set in a seedy-feeling LA, Crash intertwines the stories of a range of people from different racial and social backgrounds, as their lives and their struggles sort of converge over the course of a 36-hour period. The film spends its runtime trying to convey the severity of racial discrimination and relations in a post-9/11 California, but really stumbles at a lot of hurdles. For me, the message that this is trying to deliver is just so bizarre, and the way they try to go about it is just so backwards to the point where the film feels more like a showcase for discrimination than something critiquing it. After following these stories of police officers, carjackers, government officials, store owners, handymen of all different races and backgrounds, the film basically delivers the sentiment that everyone is subliminally racist to a variety of levels, and that's just how it is, They're cool with it. And what the hell kind of a message is that? I mean, one of the opening scenes is of these two carjackers, played very nicely by Larenz Tate and Ludacris, of all people. And Ludacris's character is giving this big sort of speech around how they're being mistreated in a white neighborhood, and he's making a big, bold critique on the stereotypes placed on them.
We're the only two black faces surrounded by a sea of over-caffeinated white people, so you tell me, why aren't we scared?
And then they turn around and do this.
Get the fuck out of the car!
Give me the keys!
Come on, hurry up!
I mean, it's a bold start for a film working to expose the nature of racial prejudice by directly conforming to the very negative stereotypes they just laid out. And it's as we move through the story where we find out that basically everyone is just really racist in LA. And there's what is essentially a hierarchy of ethnicity in the city, which I won't get into because I think it's kind of wrong, but And it means rooting for change is made a bit of a hollow effort since apparently none of them have any sort of moral compass. People like the police officer, for example, are just genuinely so despicable that they're sort of past the point of no return, especially since the story isn't even centered around him, remember. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's no room for him to grow as a character and as a person, and we're just left with this kind of icky feeling about him. Once you've spent most of the runtime seeing him as an awful racist who assaults people on the street and is proud of the fact he's like this, him turning around and being like, you know what, I'm gonna subvert these expectations by, doing my job. I'm not really gonna make a change, but at least I'm not as much of a monster as I was before. Yeah, no, it doesn't work.
I can't look at you without thinking about the 5 or 6 more qualified white men who didn't get your job.
The reforms that these characters make to their ways are honestly so insignificant that it borders on satirical. While I won't get into every individual story and every individual plot point because, trust me, this is a dense film to watch, I think I've made my point clear. To give it some props, okay, I've been quite negative. I did find it an entertaining watch. I mean, at no point did I feel like I didn't want to be sat watching this, so, on that front, I have no complaints. The cast as well is just a melting pot of famous faces. They all give, fine performances. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing Oscar-worthy, but I thought Sean Tube, who plays the Persian convenience store owner, was probably the highlight of the cast. His whole story in particular was something I actually found, quite moving, thanks mostly in part to his portrayal of this misguided and oftentimes misjudged shopkeeper, towing the line between being this really quite unpleasant man to being this, struggling shop owner that you have to feel sorry for. His story also just goes to like a crazy dark place, and when I say those emotional beats hit hard, they hit hard. But not everything follows in suit. In general, while I've made it clear that the substance behind a lot of the dialogue isn't the greatest, I do just want to point out how insanely unnatural Ludacris's lines are in some scenes. In a way, he's kind of the narrator of the struggles that many face, and they use his really quite preachy conversations to get the social context across. But just listen to what this guy's saying.
You have no idea why they put them great big windows on the sides of buses, do you?
Why?
to humiliate the people of color who are reduced to riding on it.
I didn't know that.
Nobody is speaking like this in real life, okay? But that's where I'm going to leave it with Crash. Messaging-wise, this was totally misguided, but on an entertainment level, solid. A lot of the more shocking and emotional moments definitely shone through, saving this from being, well, slop. And when taking a look at the potential spread of Oscar contenders that year, the consensus seems to lie with Brokeback Mountain. But until I get around to watching that, or anything else that's actually good from the shoddy year that was 2005, I'ma just have to accept Crash as the true winner. I then watched Cimarron. I think that's how you say it. Now, if you haven't heard of this, then don't worry, because literally nobody has watched this. And it seems that the only people that have are just in pursuit of that 100% completion of the Best Picture winners. Cimarron won at the 4th Academy Awards in 1931, beating out some other films that, again, literally nobody has ever heard of. But other notable releases around that time were Charlie Chaplin's City Lights and Fritz Lang's M, neither of which had any impact on the Academy, since one was silent and the other was foreign. Both bad traits to have when sniffing for an Oscar in 1931. Going from Crash to this, you know, it really made me appreciate how engaging Crash actually was, because Cimarron, oh, it was just slow. It was just crazy slow in comparison. We follow Yancey Cravat and his family as they set up shop in an Oklahoma boomtown, and we follow the 40-odd years that follow that. Cravat is a man with uncompromising ethics and the ability to do, well, anything apparently, as we find out over the 2-hour runtime. From leading sermons to printing newspapers to becoming governor, this man walked so Charles Foster Kane could run. Now, the scale of this story is massive, and it's something that I really need to give it credit for. The opening scene is a recreation of the 1889 Oklahoma land rush, and the amount of extras and horses is honestly outrageous. According to Wikipedia, 28 cameramen and more than 5,000 costume extras were used to film the sequence. 5,000. I mean, it's not exactly Ben-Hur, but still. Even if the camera work is a bit rough around the edges, the sheer enormity of it all is something that you can't help but appreciate. It's an ethos of scale and ambition that's retained throughout the story, with a small town developing right before our eyes, and that scope remaining massive. Outside the fact that it's all just on a huge scale, Cimarron really struggles with basically everything else. Now, to give it some slack, this was released almost a century ago, which is genuinely mental to think about, but it doesn't excuse the fact that the audio is genuinely awful. Like, oh my word, it's a subtitles or you won't hear anything kind of deal.
Yeah, I got a wife and son, 4 years old now.
Obviously, old films tend to sound worse because, you know, I don't know what their mic game was like back in 1931, but in all the outdoor sequences, the scale can really work against it in the sense that the dialogue is just completely shrouded in the ambient noise and the shouting of all the extras. But yeah, you know, since it's this old, I'll cut it some slack. Similarly, this film can feel really dated at times thanks to its more questionable portrayal of race and ethnic minorities in the story. Sorry, I'm not sure why all these reviews are turning into weird racial commentaries, you know, who knows? Many of the jokes made and the comic relief comes at the expense of this guy, Isaiah. Poor Isaiah, man. And his more caricature-like nature really does reinforce the negative tropes of the time. And though these kind of tropes are often seen with films released, you know, back in the day, it still gets a bit icky to watch knowing that his presence probably wasn't due to the context of the story, but instead the time that the actual film was made. But I mean, on the other hand, Cimarron has been heralded by many for its more progressive representation of Native Americans. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. They don't seem to take a very central role in the story. I'm not disagreeing, you know, with anything, but these iffy portrayals aren't even where the issues of the film end. As I said before, the scope of the story here is big, stuffing 40 long and complex years of life into a 2-hour runtime, and the pacing and the coverage of lots of the story beats does struggle under this. Some major plot points are just sort of abandoned and left to be told through title cards, and it comes off as really lazy sometimes, sort of like the filmmaker couldn't be bothered to justify the reason for something happening, so instead they plainly tell us it's happened and move on without much justification. I mean, they decided that the random conversation about wallpaper just had to be heard in full, but the reasoning for Cravat getting up and disappearing for a decade, you know, just wasn't really relevant. Bizarre choices. It's, you know, it's just a strange time. But quickly, if you haven't already, then please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm trying to hit 200 subscribers soon, so if you're enjoying the video, then please click that button. Alright people, action stations, it's time for the main attraction, the Broadway Melody. Across the board, it's the worst rated Best Picture winner of all time. 5.5 on IMDb, 2.4 on Letterboxd, 21% on Rotten Tomatoes. The scores on the doors are rather dire. And after watching it, 1929 must have been a slow year. I'm gonna level with you. After watching Crash, I was actually really hopeful for what was to come. I didn't think it was that bad, and maybe these films were just overhated, you know? Then, after Cimarron, my expectations were somewhat humbled, but this was just plain bad. At least Crash was entertaining. At least Cimarron had those crazy set pieces. The Broadway Melody has legitimately no redeeming factors. This was the second ever Best Picture winner, and also the first ever sound film to win the award, so, you know, that's a pretty freaking cool milestone. Is it the reason it won? Most probably. But it was also one of the earliest musicals to feature a Technicolor sequence, though unfortunately that has basically just been lost to time. Other nominees included Alibi, The Hollywood Review of 1929, In Old Arizona, and The Patriot. Again, all films that nobody has watched. But back to the film in question. We follow two sisters, Hank and Queen, as they move to New York and try to make it big on Broadway, finding themselves entangled in this weird manipulative love triangle with fellow performer Eddie.
I'll show you what I want.
As for the film itself, you know, well, I don't want to just dog on it because that seems really unfair, but there's honestly nothing going on here. You know, there's nothing to bring to the table. I've got no deep or insightful comments to make about this. It's just a very slow, self-indulgent, poorly acted, and incredibly uninteresting story about a Broadway show and a lover's tiff. How it blagged its way to this award is beyond me. Like, there's no way that this was the pinnacle of cinema in 1929. And how Bessie Love managed to get a Best Actress nomination, I will never know. While a lot of these older performances tend to come off as much more stage-like and much more, well, performative in comparison to modern actors.
Oh, no, you're not. Oh, yes, I am. Well, you're not. And you're gonna listen to me.
Nothing here even works on a stage actor level. There are these long one-takes of dialogue that stretch on for just uncomfortable lengths of time, and paired with a camera that sort of just sets itself up in the most boring places imaginable, and performers that are in some cases actively stumbling over their painfully uninteresting lines, the film really flounders. These one-takes aren't even limited to the dialogue, with the actual Broadway show elements being so incredibly self-indulgent yet unimpressive that it baffles me. What's supposed to be the zenith of this film's plot really just does not hit. And these long dancing sequences where, in my humble opinion as a person that doesn't dance, the dancing isn't even that good. Even on a vibes level, okay? A vibes level, we're stooping to the lowest of the low here in terms of substance. It's all a bit confused, as if it doesn't really know what it wants to be. The ending, which I won't spoil for you guys, don't worry, you can still have the pleasure of watching this yourself, is actually really quite tragic, and it's not the emotion that this film strives to set up. We move through watching this, and it just doesn't really do much to make us care. As I said, I mean, I pre-warned you, nothing much to say about this. Wow. So, after watching these three films, what is my final verdict, and what has the Oscars got wrong? I think if we take a step back and look at the wider picture, the Oscars has actually had very few missteps over the years, with the truly bad films coming out basically 100 years ago, in a time where lots of films were actually just quite bad, and Crash being the only contemporary example of a film that people genuinely don't like. Yeah, there have been some controversial winners, you know, something like Green Book, but they weren't bad films, maybe just undeserving of the win. The fact that Cimarron and the Broadway Melody have just faded into near total obscurity does cement the fact that they're not very good. But look at Crash. I mean, people still talk about it all the time, even if it is for the wrong reasons. You gotta admit, the Oscars does a pretty good job at picking films that actually stay relevant over time. Maybe not last year. I can't see Anora for sticking around, to be honest. But in general they do. But what do you think of these bad Best Picture winners? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.